shrieked. That's animal assault. I told her if she ever flew surveillance over my land again, I'd start charging airspace tax. Tasha filed an emergency motion for protection and sanctions. Karen responded with a counter-motion accusing me of weaponizing poultry. The judge, clearly exhausted, issued a warning: any further interference, false filings, or drone activity would result in fines. Karen left the courthouse mumbling something about deep state poultry agents. I wasn't surprised when the next thing Karen did was show up in a high-visibility vest, clipboard in hand, and a walkie-talkie clipped to her waistband like she was managing traffic at a concert. She stood at the bottom of my drive and shouted into a megaphone that the Residential Standards Coalition was now operational and that all landowners within sightline radius were subject to review. The phrase, sightline radius, didn't exist in any zoning manual I'd ever read, but Karen wasn't about facts, she was about theater. The goats ignored her. Rustopher gave her the side eye and kept pecking gravel. I watched from the porch with a thermos of coffee and my phone recording. It would have been funny if it wasn't so unsettling. By the afternoon, she'd put up 3 more laminated signs on neighboring fence posts, one of which included a QR code that led to a Google Doc labeled Coalition Bylaws Draft V12. It was mostly copied rules from suburban Florida, slightly edited to fit our rural Montana context, though not well. One clause referenced no more than 2 pool floats per home, and another banned banana trees within 15 feet of a property line. She'd highlighted a rule about livestock needing to be housed out of public view and added in pen, including goats, sheep, cows, llamas, and missed birds. I called Tasha again. She's gone from lawsuit to cosplay. Tasha didn't laugh this time. Let her play. We're working on something bigger. I asked what she meant, but she told me to wait. We need one more move from her. One more big swing. We didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, I came home from the feed store and found a brand new fence running along my southern boundary, the same area where the half-built HOA improvement barrier had been previously halted. But now it was finished, and this time the fence extended well onto my property, about 10 feet in. I walked the line, pulled out my phone, and opened the property app. Sure enough, the corner posts were in the wrong place. Someone had built a permanent structure on my land without permission. My land. I could feel the heat rising in my chest. Karen had finally crossed the legal line. I didn't tear the fence down. Not yet. I took pictures from every angle, printed off the GPS boundaries, and called the sheriff. He showed up an hour later and brought his measuring tape. When he confirmed what I already knew, he whistled low. Yeah, she's over, he said. She claims she built this? I nodded. She says it's part of a community enhancement project. He laughed. It's enhancement, all right, of her ego. He made a report and forwarded it to the county. Tasha filed a cease and desist and a claim for land encroachment before sunset. But the real twist came the next morning. Karen came marching up the drive wearing a helmet. Not a bike helmet. A tactical one, black, with side straps and a chin buckle. She also had on elbow pads and was holding a rolled-up blueprint. She announced loudly, "We're beginning Phase 2 of visual mitigation." I blinked. Visual what? She pointed to Peaches, who was lazily chewing her cud near the fence. This animal presents a visual nuisance to community enjoyment. She's becoming a landmark. A distraction. A hazard. I stared. She's chewing grass. Karen opened her blueprint dramatically and showed me a plan to build a view shield, which turned out to be a giant plywood wall, painted beige, along the entire length of my pasture facing her home. Once this is up, she said, we won't have to suffer through daily exposure to barnyard activity. Peaches, as if on cue, spit in Karen's direction. It landed 2 feet short, but the timing was impeccable. I told her if she put up one plank of that wall, I'd call the sheriff. Again. She just smiled and said she was exercising her right to visual peace. That phrase alone made Tasha groan when I related to her later. I swear she's just making this up as she goes, she said. But this is good. Really good. She's documenting her own instability. We just need it to tip. And then it did. Because Karen's next idea was to fly a banner over my property. I heard the buzz first. Then saw the small white drone dragging a plastic sheet through the sky. It said, "Warning, unapproved livestock below." I was speechless. Absolutely speechless. Peaches tried to chase the drone but gave up after a few lazy steps. I just stood there, arms crossed, watching it drift slowly over the barn. 2 neighbors came by later to check if it was real. One of them brought popcorn. "This is better than Netflix," he said. Karen, meanwhile, claimed the drone was a temporary signage experiment under Emergency Coalition Authority. That phrase made it into Tasha's next filing. We asked for an emergency injunction. The judge granted it. The next time Karen came by, it was with a petition in hand. She wanted signatures to enforce a quiet zone in the valley. No roosters before 10 a.m., no goats within 20 feet of any road, no cowbells, no llama noises. I read the petition twice. Then asked her if she knew llamas didn't even make loud noises. She said, "That's your opinion." I told her if she ever came onto my property again without written permission, she'd be facing a trespassing charge. She said she was entitled to reasonable proximity under community cohesion statutes. I said those didn't exist. She said, "They should." That night, I walked the fence line again. This time I had company. Pickles had grown enough to hop along behind me. Peaches followed slowly. Rustopher was asleep. The stars were coming out, and for a moment, everything felt normal again. Just land and sky and animals. But I knew it wouldn't last. Karen wasn't just trying to win. She was trying to create a world where she made the rules. And she wasn't done building. 2 days later, she tried again. This time she delivered a cease and desist letter of her own. She claimed that my rooster's morning calls were a form of auditory aggression, and were violating the peaceful soundscape mandate she had written into her latest version of the coalition rules. The letter was printed in all caps, on pink stationery, and signed, "Madam Chairwoman." I forwarded it to Tasha. She didn't reply with words. Just a photo of her holding a glass of wine and pointing at her fireplace where she was feeding the letter to the flames. It wasn't just funny anymore. Karen had begun approaching my neighbors, offering coalition credits in exchange for reporting me. She tried to get photos of my animal enclosures. One night, she shined a flashlight over my property for 15 minutes. When I asked what she was doing, she shouted, "Ensuring compliance." I was done. Absolutely done. I called the sheriff, who said we had enough to move forward with a harassment suit. Tasha filed it the next morning. This wasn't just about goats anymore. It was about rights, boundaries, and making sure no one else ever had to go through something like this. I didn't sleep much that week. Every time I heard a rustle or distant engine, I half expected Karen to show up with another fence post or drone stunt. But nothing happened. Not until Friday morning, when a thick manila envelope arrived in my mailbox. Inside was a notice of an emergency hearing. Karen had filed a new motion. This one claimed I had built unauthorized animal structures, was housing exotic livestock, and had created a hostile living environment via passive-aggressive rooster deployment. Monday morning arrived with a strange kind of stillness. Not quiet exactly, but the kind of hush that settles before a storm. I put on a clean shirt, fed the animals, and packed a folder with every document I had, photos, maps, vet records, receipts, everything. Pickles bleated as I headed to the truck like he wanted to come. Peaches stared at me from her patch of shade, expression unreadable. Tasha met me at the courthouse, sharp and focused, holding her coffee like a weapon. She gave me a quick nod and said, "Karen filed 23 exhibits. Just so you know." I asked, "Any of them sane?" She said, "Only if you think a hand-drawn chart connecting your rooster to a drop in local real estate value qualifies." I sighed, long and slow. Let's get this over with. Inside the courtroom, Karen was already seated at the front with 2 oversized tote bags and a giant color poster board propped against her chair. On it, in big red letters, were the words, "The Noise Map." She'd plotted the time and direction of every crow, bleat, moo, and honk from my property over the last month. It looked like a toddler had tried to design an airport. When the judge walked in, he took one look at it and raised an eyebrow. Karen stood as he sat her day. "Your Honor," she said, "I rise today not just for myself, but for the community." He held up a hand. "Sit down, Ms. Mason. Let's begin." Karen's opening argument was a blend of indignation, pseudoscience, and suburban HOA lingo completely misapplied to a rural county. She referred to my property as a non-conforming entity, and claimed it posed a persistent sensory disturbance. She read from her own coalition's rulebook and quoted decibel measurements she allegedly took with her phone. "The rooster registers above OSHA limits for safe workplace noise," she said with deep concern. "And the goat," she added, "has a particularly disruptive tone, high-pitched, repetitive, and psychologically invasive." Someone in the gallery coughed hard enough to sound suspiciously like a laugh. Karen turned. "This isn't funny. This is my piece." Tasha's rebuttal was swift and brutal. She opened with a simple question. "Your Honor, may I confirm one thing? Is there any legally recognized HOA or similar governing body associated with this property?" The judge nodded. "Confirmed. There is none." She turned to Karen. "Then why are you enforcing rules that don't exist?" Karen stood again. "Because they should exist." The judge leaned forward. "But they don't. And this court operates on law, not theory." Karen opened one of her tote bags and pulled out a stack of emails from other residents complaining about noise, most of which were actually her own comments under various fake names. One of them was signed, "Concerned Neighbor 67. Tasha pointed this out. Karen didn't blink. "Those were submitted on behalf of the collective." The judge sighed. We moved to the evidence phase. Karen rolled out the big guns. Photos of peaches near the fence line. A 3-minute video of pickles bleeding for food, looped with captions that said, "Unrelenting disturbance." A spreadsheet of alleged times when my animals interfered with optimal meditation hours. She even submitted a complaint from her son claiming he couldn't concentrate on video games because of the goat's sounds. Tasha, calm as a lake in winter, waited until Karen was done and then submitted exactly 3 things. A notarized deed confirming I owned the property outright, a signed letter from the county confirming no HOA existed, and an affidavit from my veterinarian affirming all animals were healthy, legally kept, and within zoning law. Then she called the surprise witness. One of Karen's former neighbors from her old neighborhood in Idaho. He testified via video, stating under oath that Karen had attempted the same thing there, forming an HOA, inventing rules, suing people over lawn chairs and barking dogs. "She said the neighborhood needed discipline," he said. "She tried to fine me for having a pink flamingo in my yard." The courtroom murmured. Karen looked like she might come unglued. "Irrelevant!" she shouted. The judge banged his gavel. "Sit down, Ms. Mason. One more outburst and you'll be removed." Then came my turn to speak. I stood, hands shaking a little, not with fear, but with that strange adrenaline you get when the line between absurdity and anger has been blurred too long. "Your Honor," I said, "I moved to this land to get away from noise. From rules. From meetings about whether or not someone's garden hose was rolled up properly. I live quietly. I keep to myself. I raise animals, not alarms. The only reason we're here is because one person doesn't like that she can't control what happens outside her window." I glanced at Karen. "I didn't join a neighborhood. I bought land. And I don't know anyone an apology for how I live on it." There was silence. The judge leaned back, folded his hands, and said he would issue a ruling that afternoon. Karen stood up again, uninvited, and declared, "This man is part of a larger pattern. First the rooster, then the goat, and now he's bringing in a second cow. That part was actually true.